Morgan Belton, Zakira Davis, Sarah Pullian, Ryan Stewart, and Chatera Johnson. For the third year in a row, we have placed in show choir. This year we placed second. Our show choir is Nandi Long Shipman, Kayla Pickett, Jamaria Edmonds, Morgan Bennett Belton, Kayla Goff, Kayla Robinson, Victoria Lightfoot, Tiana Foster, Janelle Green, Sade Mathis, Alyssa Boyd, Karis Davis, Sheldon Johnson, Kiara Matthews, Curtis Martin, and Martia Gadsden. We placed second place also in robotics. That team is Devani Patel, Joshua Mosley, Jordan Dove, Savani Johnson, Victory Bryce, Swazir Belton, Jeffrey Feaster, Chiquita Abel, and Faith Abel. We also won second place in campaign skit. Janelle Green, Trinell Boyd, Zakira Davis, Jalen Irby, Sheldon Johnson, Malcolm Armstrong, Harrison Kennedy, Brian Siebels, Malik Coleman, Brenda Kennedy, Sharice Trapp, Anichi McKinstry, Eden Hemphill, Brianna Edmonds, Krishayla Boyd, and Taleo Collier. For the third year in a row, we have placed in our oratory competition, and that will be Jamar Green for third place. And this is our second year competing in this category, and this year we actually placed third in problem-solving scenario. That will be Deshaun Belton, Malcolm Armstrong, Janelle Irby, Jalen Epps, Malcolm Coleman, Janelle Green, and Sammy Robinson. And this was our first year competing in this category, which was freshman problem solving, and we placed third in the state, and that is for Joshua Mosley, Colin Gadsden, and Joshua Green. And this is we are very, very proud of this young man. He placed first in the state for this academic competition. He had to take a test. He competed against everyone in South Carolina, and that is Joshua Mosley for social studies. And finally, the weekend was capped off by our one and only Nathaniel Adams being elected as the South Carolina Beta President for the year 2019-2020. We are very excited. We are a very small county, but this is the second time in the last 3 years we have won this position. So we are excited to take all of our kids to nationals. This marks the most we've won at state as a club ever in our history. The Griffins representing South, our school's pride, maintain the school's mantra, Griffins believe, Griffins succeed, and Griffins achieve. We want to thank our sponsors as well. Without their willingness to work with our betas, none of this would have been possible. Ms. Cyrus, Ms. Jefferson, please come up, Ms. Jefferson, Ms. Whitaker, and Mr. Graham. There were also other teachers that helped out and did not even have to, and they stepped up and helped us. So I'll be remiss not to mention them. Mr. Drake, who helped with our robotics team, and Ms. Thomas with our show choir. So please come up, Ms. Thomas.
And as the proud principal, I would also like to congratulate and thank Ms. Taylor. Ms. Taylor is an advisor. She's been an advisor since I've been the principal at Fairfield Central, and then we lost some of her co-advisors, so she had to recruit new advisors, and you can see that they can have continued the Griffin excellence under her leadership and working with our students. So we're very excited. But one additional thing I would be remiss, I was able to spend a day with them at the convention. And these students, we dealt with the tragedy this year at Fairfield Central High School of the death and passing of Mr. Sammy Canedius Jr., who was also a Beta Club member, and he competed with them on last year. So they felt like they needed to participate in the talent competition and dedicate the talent competition to their deceased classmate. And it was very, very powerful. Those kids were able to suppress their feelings to get through a very difficult moment for them. And we received recognition and congratulatory response from all over the state. So many schools reached out to us about Sammy because they remembered him from last year. So I wanted to tell them in front of everybody that I am so proud of you, your perseverance, representing us with Ribbon Pride at the convention. And this is another example why I'm a very proud principal of Fairfield Central High School. So thank you.
Mr. Frick, before any more students leave and any more parents leave, I, as one of the members of the board, wanted to congratulate you all. Job well done, but we ain't finished yet, right?
Yes, sir.
We ain't finished yet. We're going to Oklahoma. We're going to show them what Fairfield Central and Fairfield District is all about.
Yes,
You
sir.
understand what I'm saying? Parents, we thank you so much for just being there, pushing your children, and continue to do that. I just wanted to say that from the bottom of my heart. Y'all know I love you.
Yes, sir.
Board Chairman, this concludes student presentations. For the next presentations from Sylvia Harris.
Good evening. Could I get Miss Thomas and Miss Graham to come up? I think Miss Graham somewhere. She's back there. And Mr. Mike from ABM. You're not in trouble, Miss Thomas. Don't feel like it. As long as you're not a big crybaby like Miss Graham. On last 2 weeks ago, I've been traveling for the last 2 weeks. Anyway, I entered a contest. I put my name in the little thing. I told Mr. Miller, when I walked in, I said, I feel like I'm gonna win this. I honestly did. I had that feeling I'm gonna win this. And when I was sitting there, my leg was swollen. I was on a high top chair. I was sitting in the back. When I seen the guy pull the thing, and I read his lips, and he said, Sylvia. I said, he's gonna call my name. I jumped down off that chair and ran to the front. I said, I told you I was gonna win.
You weren't living.
I was not sleeping. And they immediately asked me, okay, we'll get with you on where you want me to send the check. I said, I'm giving it to my kids at my school.
Yes, Lord.
So it's not a whole lot, but I wanted to divide it between the two groups. We have two groups that's going out of the country, and it's on $500 apiece, but it means a lot to me for y'all to have it. So I already had talked to them before I left that this check was going to them. You're welcome. But I'm gonna leave this here. Mr. Robinson gonna handle the rest. Did you want to say something?
Just on behalf of everyone at ABM, we'd like to thank you for your continued commitment to education.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that was great to have all those presentations. And Mrs. Willie, I want to let you know an unbiased opinion. Was a participant with your club said the show choir should have won.
Yes,
I heard
I
that.
agree.
So I just want to pass that along.
We don't win internationalism.
There you go. All right, down to board minutes. Chair will entertain a motion regarding the board minute from the March 19th, 2019 meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we accept the board, approve the minutes from the March 19 regular call board meeting.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a second on that? Thank you. It's been motioned by Ms. Harrison, seconded by Mr. Davis to approve the board minutes. Any discussion on the board minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the board minutes from March 19, 2019 indicate by raising your right hand. 6 in favor, opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Superintendent's report.
Well, as you can tell, I am not Dr. Green.
You've been very busy this evening.
And on his behalf, I'd like to share with you his superintendent's report. We want to commend Maya McMillan, a 5th grade student from Fairfield Magnet School for Math and Science, who was selected as the winner, as the state winner of the 2019 Children's Book Challenge, which was sponsored by Enlighten South Carolina, which is an educational initiative of the state's independently owned electric cooperatives. She was one of 12 finalists selected out of 300 submissions, and this morning she received a $500 check in celebration of her accomplishment. Wow. And so we had the opportunity, myself along with another colleague, had the opportunity this morning. The CEO from the Fairfield Electric Cooperative presented the check this morning, and Maya shared that she plans to use the check toward her upcoming trip to D.C. They're leaving this Thursday. Also from Fairfield Middle School, the orchestra received an excellent rating, their first ever at the South Carolina Concert Performance Assessment. The teacher is Ms. Wise. And again, this is the first time, and this is a program that we are continually building and adding students. And so they received an excellent rating at the South Carolina Concert Performance Assessment. And this past Saturday, the Golden Sass Fairfield Middle School dance team, we want to congratulate them for being crowned grand champion at the dance trifecta competition at Westwood High School this past Saturday. And they also placed first in the stand battle and second place in the field show categories as well. And I learned today as well that the elite ladies also competed, and they also in turn placed as well in this competition. Switching over to sports, Coach Dean, if you are a follower of Fairfield Central High School on Twitter, they recently acknowledged the fact that Coach Dean celebrated his 100th win as head baseball coach of Fairfield Central High School Griffins. And just a few The upcoming Hall of Fame Gala will be held on April 27th at 6 p.m. in the gym at Fairfield Central High School. If you would like a ticket, please make contact with Ms. Jackie Wallace in reference to getting a ticket. Also, as you all know, Ms. Chandra Jefferson will be competing as a finalist for the South Carolina Teacher of the Year Award. And that will also take place, on May the 8th, which also coincides at the exact day and the exact time that our STEM Early College Academy second cohort will also be graduating as well. So we're all going to be quite busy that evening going back and forth. But if you will, if you're interested in attending that gala, then please make sure you submit your name to Ms. Brown so that a ticket can be purchased on your behalf. And lastly, the dates for the dedication of the Keller Miller Cafeteria, along with the Macquarie Liston Gym, will be forthcoming. So we hope to have an email to you by the end of the week confirming those dates. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
Dr. Avery, I just want to say, I think it's amazing that we have the problem that we got to figure out how to be at the banquet honoring our possible Teacher of the Year and our second cohort graduating from Midlands Tech. I call it a great problem to have. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Chairman Pruitt, I'm assuming at the end of this category, since it would have been Dr. Green's report, that I was told last meeting that we would have an update on the apartments that we call the Teachers Village.
Yes, ma'am. I talked to Dr. Green about that since he wasn't going to be president of this meeting. I thought it would be better if he were the one that made that presentation in case there were any follow-up questions on it. It's not really Dr. Avery's area, but he and I did discuss that. It is going to be on the agenda at the next meeting. We'll have an update.
Thank you, but it would have been nice to inform me since it was stated it would be done at this meeting. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Curriculum and instruction.
Item 1 under curriculum and instruction is the second and final reading of proposed 2019-20 academic calendar, and there were no changes from the first reading.
All right, this time, Chair will entertain a motion regarding the second and final reading of proposed 2019-20 academic calendar.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve second and final reading of the proposed 2019-2020 academic calendar.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
It's been a motion by Ms. Harrison. It's been seconded by Mr. Miller to approve second and final reading of the proposed 2019-20 academic calendar. Any discussion on the calendar? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving second and final reading indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0, thank you.
The next item for your approval is an overnight out-of-state field trip request. And in the board docs, the exhibit lists, of course, the Beta Club overnight out-of-state request for the Junior Beta Club, which consists of Eager Elementary, Macquarie Liston, Fairfield Elementary School, Keller Miller Elementary, and Fairfield Middle School. And they will be traveling to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And again, you all are approving the trip, not necessarily the cost associated with the trip. And item number 2 is the senior trip, which is grad night over Georgia and Atlanta, Georgia. And the cost to the student is indicated there of $70. And this is a trip specifically for the seniors of Fairfield Central High School.
Thank you, ma'am. Chair will entertain a motion in regard to the overnight out-of-state field trip request.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I want to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the overnight field trip request for Fairfield Central High School, Fairfield Middle School, Fairfield Eagle Elementary, Macquarie Liston, and School of Technology in Fairfield Elementary School and Kelly Miller Elementary School, providing a second Beta Club trip. Mr. Chair, I second.
Okay, just clarify now that the the item contained the Beta Club trip and the senior trip. Are you including that as well, or is your motion simply regarding Beta Club?
Well,
We do.
included it, if you need me to go back, because both of them are, you know.
I just want to make sure, I thought your motion included both of them, but I wanted to clarify that.
Well, let's just go ahead and get the one that I recommend.
Okay, that'll be fine. That'll be fine. All right, so was there a second on that?
That's it.
Thank you. It's been motioned by Mr. Miller, it's been seconded by Pastor Jackson to approve the, I'm gonna call it the Beta Club trip. Is that fair? Including the elementary school, the middle school, and Fairfield Central High School. Any discussion on the Beta Club trip?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
this is a competition, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I thought in the past that we had sort of agreed that the Beta Club would not have to be paying anything
Yes,
when
ma'am.
they're competing.
Yes, ma'am. I think what you're talking about is it said students will be paying $50.
Yes, sir.
As I understand that, and Dr. Avey can correct me if I'm wrong, that's more of a deposit. So we ensure that the folks who say that they're going to go actually attend. It's going to be pretty costly to get everybody over to Oklahoma City, so we don't want to have to reserve extra seats and buses if we don't have to. So it may be refundable. I don't know whether y'all had further discussion about that, but I'll leave that to Dr.
Ms. Hartman, the $50 deposit will be returned to the students once they arrive in Oklahoma City.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Any further question, discussion on the Beta Club trip? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving that trip indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0. All right, is there any motion in regard to the senior trip?
Okay. Second.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
make a motion, we approve the, accept the recommendation to approve the seniors, Fairfield Central High School traveling to Atlanta, Georgia, for grad night.
I second.
Thank you. It's been motioned by Ms. Harrison. It's been seconded by Pastor Jackson to approve the senior class trip. Any discussion on that?
Okay, the students are paying $70 on that trip, and is the school district paying anything on this trip?
I might have to defer to Dr. Avery on that one if she has any more information, because I do not. I think they're on their own on this one. This is, you remember we always get in kind of this situation where we approve the trip, this
Well, that's what
particular
I'm
trip, but we're
verifying.
not actually paying for it because it's their trip, not,
Well, that's why I'm asking to
Yeah,
verify it.
quite frankly, I thought we'd kind of gotten away from this, but I guess we're still in this situation. The quick answer is I don't believe the district is paying for this. I think students who participate are paying for it.
That is so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the senior trip? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the senior trip indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0, thank you. Operations and Finance.
Good evening. Good evening. The first item under Operations and Finance is the March Finance Report for Board Review.
Any questions on Operation Finance Report for March? Hearing none.
Item number 2 in the board packet is a contractual matter, and the superintendent's recommending approval of a lease agreement for the old Gordon Odyssey Academy building per the attached lease.
Thank you, sir. At this time, Chair will entertain a motion regarding the contractual matter regarding the lease agreement for GOA.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
we accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve of the lease agreement for the old Gordon Odyssey Academy building, old GOAs, per the attached lease, providing a second.
Thank you, sir.
That's that.
Thank you. It's been motioned by Mr. Miller. It has been seconded by Pastor Jackson to approve the lease agreement for the old Gordon Odyssey Academy. Any discussion on that? If you recall, we've had a few folks that were interested in leasing Gordon Odyssey Academy.
Yes, sir.
I think maybe we had 2 or 3 or so. What I did is I asked Dr. Green to explore us coming up with a long-term lease because our normal agreement just didn't cover what we were doing. I didn't feel. So he reached out to our attorneys. They drafted this agreement. Essentially what this is going to do is going to get us out of the landlord business. Chameleon is going to be the primary lessor. They can sublease to other folks, as such as the places that are in there right now. But all those agreements have to be approved by us. We are leasing it to Chameleon, I think, for around $1 a year. We're not trying to make money off of it. We're just trying to get out of that business and out of paying for the utilities. And I'll defer to Dr. Avery for any other explanation.
My mic is,
Yours fell apart too.
Yeah.
I don't know what I did to mine.
you summed it up perfectly.
Thank you. I didn't mean to step on your toes, but. Any further questions on the contract?
Now, the group that, wasn't there a part of that building that was being used for tutoring?
It's the tutoring program or the after-school program with a tutoring component. The entity that had presented to us that is doing some technological or some kind of vocational training over there, they will be able to use it, but they will have to go through Chameleon.
Okay, and Chameleon's the one that's doing the tutoring?
No, that is the program that I believe we had on the agenda for the last meeting.
Right.
They just need a bigger facility to be able to use. And they also were willing to take over this responsibility if we let them do it.
So they're no longer using it?
Yes, they are.
So they're using it also?
They're going to use it too.
Did we ever find out whether they were charging for that tutoring?
I don't know exactly. Do you know on that? Which are you talking about Chameleon or are you talking about that other program?
The other program?
The other program does in fact charge. I don't know the exact cost, but they do in fact. There's a fee associated with the use of their or their tutoring.
I want to put it on a statement on the record that I feel like the district needs to be doing more tutoring if necessary for our children, instead of some other outside, especially if they're charging for them.
Well, and let me clarify this. We keep calling it a tutoring program. It is an after-school program that has a tutoring component. Their sole purpose is not tutoring, as I understand it. It is to provide an after-school program, which we have a complete lack of in this county. But they also tutor them while they're there. So your statement is noted, but I do want to clarify.
Okay, so when you're saying after-school program, what additional things do they do other than tutoring?
I mean, I would imagine whatever any other after-school program does, whatever activities they may have that make sure the children aren't wandering around and getting in trouble. Like, like they do at YMCAs and boys clubs and stuff like that.
Okay, and I do know we have tutoring as far as some of the teachers take their own time to tutor when they need help. I do know that is around the county, but I just feel like, if there's something that's specifically needed for that, then I think we need to enlarge our programs to look at that and enlarge those programs to help these children more.
Thank you.
I'd like to put on the record.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And Ms. Hartman, they are doing that.
I do know that a lot of them do.
What I'm saying is that they have tutors or mentors come into school doing I guess, school days, where they're helping them, where students are behind and they're helping them.
Oh, I know that, because I've even done it
That's what I'm
myself.
saying, so I don't want nobody out there to think that the school is not doing all these things, because they are already doing it. They got them at the elementary school, I'm sure they got them at Giger, they got them at Kelly Miller, they got them at all the elementary schools. And so they're I don't want to call anybody's name, but I know mentors who come in, and they come in and help them. If they got problem with their reading, you know, they're sent to that mentor to learn how to read, you know. And so we are doing it.
Well, I just stated that I know that for a fact, because I've been in the schools and I have seen Pat, and I have helped myself before I was on the board. And, but I'm just saying that if it's needed, I just feel like, you know, maybe we need to look into it to see if we need more.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman Fred,
Yes, sir.
just a quick question. This is a summer program, right, which is started after school. Is it lit out for this tutoring thing?
I think that you talking about the after-school program? I believe it's going to be year-round. I don't believe they've started.
No, with the other one that was on the agenda last time.
Chameleon?
No, Mrs.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, it is a summer program.
That's right.
All right. Anything further on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the contract for GOA, indicate by raising your right hand. That's 6. All those opposed? Abstentions? Thank you, ma'am.
Item number 3, budget transfer. The superintendent recommends approval of a budget transfer in the amount of $79,500 to fund the Beta Club summer competition expenses.
Thank you. At this time, Chair, will entertain a motion regarding the budget transfer for the Beta Club trip.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve the budget transfer in the amount of $79,500 to help fund the Beta Club summer competition expenses.
I'll second that. I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson, I'm sorry. That's okay.
It's been motioned by Ms. Harrison. We're going to give the tie to Pastor Jackson on the second to approve the budget transfer of $79,500 to assist in paying for the Beta Club trip. Any questions, concerns on this? Just one quick one. This is obviously money that is budgeted now, correct? We're transferring it. Do we know where we're transferring it from?
From the, we have unused SRO contractual expenses, and
Okay.
that's what we're transferring.
Gotcha. These are the SROs that we budgeted, but those positions did not get filled this year.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions on that budget transfer? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the budget transfer indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0, thank you.
The next item is a facility usage request. The superintendent recommends the board approve the facility usage request with waiver of fees for Jenkinsville, Salcahatchee.
Thank you. Chair, entertain a motion regarding the facility usage, including fee waiver.
Yes. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I want to accept the superintendent recommendation the board approve facility usage request with the waiver of fees for the Jenkinsville, Salcahatchee, providing consent.
Thanks, sir.
I second.
A motion by Mr. Miller, it's been seconded by Pastor Jackson to approve the facility use agreement for Jenkinsville, Salcahatchee with fee waiver. Any questions or concerns on that?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I think this is a great program. Didn't we bring this up though for another building? Is there 2 of them?
It's 2. We're going to have 2 this year, and they're going to be, I believe, working over in the western side of the county, which I'm excited to see that, quite frankly.
That's great. remembered, I thought I remembered.
It was, last one was the usual Salkehatchie, and they're coming back again, and we look forward to having them come as many years as the other Salkehatchie project has come. Welcome and glad to have you.
That's great. Another question is, if any of our children want to take part in something like that, is that part of that? I mean, can that be part of that?
I'm sure we can tell you how to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the fee usage agreement with fee waiver indicate by raising your right hand. It's like 7-0 to me. And what we're here all for, the first reading of the budget.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. And as usual, we'll do the presentation first and then have the motion for the budget approval. And our budget really is fairly similar from year to year. And so what I've tried to do this year is simplify it a little bit. There are quite a few more slides in here that you have in your board packets, but I'll really only cover a few of them. This first slide is a comparison of our revenue as budgeted for 18-19, which was approved. First is on the right-hand side, what we're proposing, and this is the revenue section for 19-20. And so what you see here is the first line item where it has the total allocated last year was $41.2 million for this year. For 19-20, we're proposing a budget of $45.2 million, so approximately $4 million increase from this year into next year. And we have several components of revenue here, which I'll go through. But in a nutshell, there are really two primary areas that make up that $4 million difference in revenue. The first one is our local tax revenue. Last year, we had total local tax revenues budgeted of about $32.4 million. And I keep saying last year, I mean for this year. And for next year, we're proposing $35.6 million. The $2.9 million of that total $4 million difference is attributable to our non-residential property tax revenues. And as I'm sure you're familiar, we receive revenues from taxes, property taxes for operations, not from homeowner resident property taxes, but from non-residential properties and from business properties. And so we're not proposing a millage increase or a tax increase, but the increase of that $2.9 million is primarily due to an increase in the property values that make up our property taxes for our operations. And due to that increase in property values, we're anticipating having an additional $2.9 million in local property tax revenue for next year compared to this year. There are some other categories that we have right below that, the bullets following that. We have state residential reimbursement. There's virtually no change. Last year, that was about $3 million this year. For next year, we're saying about $3.1 million. And other state residential reimbursements of about $2 million, virtually no change. And other local taxes, virtually no change, about $200,000 in additional funds. And so there's really, the bulk of it just is due to our local property tax revenue, due to the increases in the property tax value, particularly with business property tax values. The other category of funding that's significant for school districts is the Education Finance Act. Now, for this current year, we budgeted $4.1 million, and next year we're projecting, based on what the state has projected for our district, that we will receive about $3.4 million. The Education Finance Act is where we get our per pupil funding, and all of that is driven by the legislature. It's impacted by how much they decide they're going to fund per student, but it's also impacted by the number of students in total in the state of South Carolina. So as that pool of students grows, if the total budget remains somewhat fixed, then that does impact how much money we could get for the next year. Obviously, districts that are growing rapidly, that have a rapid increase in students, their money from the Education Finance Act will increase, and that does impact other districts. So we'll have a reduction there of about $700,000 in that particular fund. We also have the next category of state salary and fringe reimbursements, and that's where the state provides us with funds to help supplement the cost of salary and our portion of the fringe benefit costs that the district actually has to pay. And so again, for this current year, we budgeted $3.1 million, and for next year, we're looking at approximately $3 million. The one category that does increase, that does offset the $700,000 loss that we had in the Education Finance Act, will be that second bullet on the right-hand side, where we have a teacher salary increase. As many of you are aware, the legislature has decided that they will give overall raises to the teacher salary schedule of approximately 4%. And they are funding a good portion of that, not all of it, but they are funding a good portion of that in some of the fringe benefits. And so under that teacher salary increase of $0.7 million, which is $700,000, that's what we're projected to get from the state right now to help offset the cost of the 4% increase for teacher salaries and some of the fringe attributable to that. But I do want to emphasize, we're not receiving enough to cover the entire cost of that 4% increase. And that's an increase that, of course, we weren't anticipating. It's a good increase for teachers, especially considering the need to recruit teachers in South Carolina. However, it is quite costly. And the last category down below under other is typically where we have transfers from some of our other funds, and the funds are transferred into the general fund. The most significant difference here is the bottom bullet point, where we're budgeting for a transfer from our fund balance for the retention bonuses of $1 million. And if you recall, in the fall, not actually in the fall, well, in the fall, we did mention to the board that we wanted to set aside $1 million from our surplus from last year for salaries for this year. And then in January, we came to the board, and that's when Dr. Green proposed the retention and recruitment bonuses of the $5,000 for our certified staff and $3,000 for classified staff. So that $1 million will be coming from our fund balance as a transfer into our budget for next year to help offset the cost for the bonuses that we have. And so what I wanted to do on this slide is really just summarize the total change in our budget, so you can get just an overview of where the money's coming from and then where it's going. We'll go into a little bit more detail on especially how the money's being spent. But as I mentioned before we're looking at proposing a $4 million increase. $2.9 million of that increase in revenue will be coming from local taxes due to higher assessed property values. But again, I repeat, there is no millage increase that we're proposing for next year. $1 million of the revenue of that $4 million will be coming from the fund balance, as I mentioned, to help offset the cost of the retention bonuses, and then approximately another $100,000 from other revenue sources. So that's really in a nutshell the total of where the $4 million is coming from, comparing our revenue, what we have budgeted for this year, compared to next year. So now that we have $4 million more, well, where is that money going? Well, the entire $4 million really is all going to salaries and benefits. $2.8 million, as we mentioned before in one of our previous board meetings, is our estimated cost to pay the retention bonuses of $5,000 and $3,000 plus the associated fringe costs. Now, while we don't anticipate there won't be retirement costs, we still have to pay our share of Social Security on that, and also our share of workers' compensation costs on the bonuses. So there are some fringe costs associated with the payment of those bonuses. So that $4 million, $2.8 million is related strictly to the bonuses and the fringe costs. The other $1.2 million is attributable to other salaries and benefits increases. And those items are, as I mentioned, the state, they're funding a portion of the 4% increase for teachers, but not the entire thing. So there is an unfunded portion of the teacher salary increase, plus those related fringe costs that we as a district have to pick up. And for the administrative staff, non-teachers, and classified staff, there will not be a salary scale increase, but there will be a salary step increase. So in other words, those who are on our administrative salary scale will move up one additional step on that scale, which means there will be a pay increase for them. And so that is a part of that $1.2 million, as well as the fringe costs for those additional salaries. And the final line item is there'll be a significant cost increase in our retirement, because the district does have to pay a portion of retirement cost for employees. I believe right now there's no anticipated increase for the employee portion of retirement, but we as an employer will have an increase, and that's going up from, right now we pay about 20.6%, and next year is slated to be 21.6% of every dollar that we pay in salaries. So when we have that additional 1% rate in retirement cost, plus higher salaries, and then also because we're paying higher salaries compared to this year, that means we're also paying more in Social Security costs. So we have another significant increase in terms of our fringe benefits. And so under that $1.2 million category, again, you have the unfunded portion of teacher salary increases, the administrative salary step increases, as well as our retirement and Social Security cost increase. And so this chart shows the comparison of what we budgeted for the 18-19 school year in some of our different categories compared to the 19-20 budget that we're proposing. And as you can see, under salaries and benefits, the projected increase will be $4 million, which really is the sum of our total increase. And under our purchase services, which is for things like travel, And contract services, we'll have a slight decrease of about $60,000, and I'll go to a little bit more detail about what's causing these changes. Supplies and materials, which is primarily for things like classroom supplies, supplies across the district, different things of that nature. There'll be an increase of about $30,000, no change in capital outlay. And then in our other objects, which is primarily for dues, fees, and other kind of miscellaneous types of transactions, then we have a decrease of about $51,000. And finally, our transfers, which is for the Midford payment to Chester, we anticipate an increase of about $38,000. So in a nutshell, that really sums up that $4 million change in how that money is being spent in some of those different categories. So under the salaries and benefits, again, that $4 million increase, just to kind of summarize, the teachers will be paid on the teacher salary schedule, which is based on the state's proposed 4% salary increase. They will also receive a step increase, so they will move up one step. And here in Fairfield, everyone moves up a step up until step 23. Want to emphasize that administrators, school administrators, district administrators who are certified are not paid on the teacher salary scale, so they're not included in that 4% increase. They are paid on an administrative salary scale for the district. The classified and administrative staff will receive a step increase based on the salary scale. There is no percentage increase proposed for classified and administrative staff. Again, that's something we tried to budget for, but due to the cost of our bonuses and the other unfunded costs for the teacher salaries that we had to pay, we were unable to include a percentage increase on the administrative staff scale. And even though there won't be that, we do have planned the district employees, as I said, all will receive a recruitment and retention bonus of $5,000 for certified staff and $3,000 for classified staff. And I'll add for the classified and administrative staff, even though there is not a salary schedule percentage increase, the $3,000, for example, increase is a sizable increase for our staff. If you compare the 4% increase that the teachers are getting, and I realize they also get the $5,000 bonus, 4% of someone who's making $75,000 is $3,000. So in essence, anyone who is classified or administrative staff, even though they're not getting the 4% salary scale increase, from $75,000 on down, they will get at least a 4% bonus in comparison to their salary. So, of course, the lower your pay is, then the greater percentage of your pay that you'll receive with that $3,000 bonus. So if you're making $30,000, then that $3,000 bonus represents a 10% portion of your salary. And so that is a nice increase in spite of the fact that we won't be giving the 4% salary scale increase for employees who are classified and administrative staff. And just as I mentioned before, another significant portion of our benefits costs are due to retirement, Social Security, and as those salaries go up, that's just, we're required to pay higher costs in retirement and Social Security. Some of the other changes that I mentioned before under purchase services, the decrease of approximately $60,000 is really just, we're projecting a decrease in some of our communications costs, just looking at the budget from the past. And for supplies and materials, the budget's just about the same, but we're anticipating an increase of about $30,000, and that's simply due to the fact that we just reconfigured where we budget some of the funds for the STEM program. In this current year, some of those costs were included under the other objects. And this year we kind of split them out and actually budgeted for them at the school level under the technology supplies category. So supplies and materials increasing because of that particular change.
Excuse me, Chairman Frick. Is it okay to ask questions as we're going along?
Let him finish up the presentation, we'll get it on the floor, and then we can ask all the questions we need to ask.
Thought it might be easier for him to address it as it's.
I know, let's go by the normal procedure.
As I just mentioned, under other objects, decrease of $51,000. That's just because we reallocated some funds for the STEM program. It's not being reallocated away from the STEM program. It's just we're changing how we're spending that money. And that's some of the funds that was actually reallocated to other areas. And that's where you saw the $30,000 increase in the supplies and materials. And then finally, the transfers. As I mentioned earlier, we're projecting that increase of $38,000 due to a projected increase in payment to Chester School District for the Midford students. One thing I'll clarify there is I know there had been some discussion about seeing that payment go down because of the number of students. However, that payment is based on a formula that includes the revenue, projected revenue, local tax revenue from Chester School District. So even if we have 2 fewer students, Midford students, that doesn't mean the payment will go down because it could be offset by higher local tax revenues in Chester School District, because the whole purpose of the payment is to supplement what Chester does not get in local taxes for those students that we do get for those students. So the way the formula is calculated, if their local tax revenue goes up in one year, that will likely increase our payment unless it's just offset by a significant decrease in the number of Midford students. So that's why the payment is projected to go up for next year. And really, these other slides I've kind of talked about. And so to summarize everything, we have a balanced budget for this first reading of $45,265,101. That balanced budget does include a transfer of $1 million from the fund balance that will be used to partially fund the district recruitment and retention bonuses. There is no millage increase proposed in the requested budget. So the district is requesting first reading approval of a budget of $45,265,101, which includes a millage of 203.1 mils.
Thank you, sir. At this time, Chair, entertain a motion regarding the budget.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve the first reading of the 1920 budget in the amount of $45,265,101, which includes no change in millage.
Thank you, ma'am.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. It's been motioned by Ms. Harrison. It's been seconded by Mr. Miller to approve first reading of the budget for the FY 1920. All right. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you tell me, you said that, if I understood right, well, let's go back, the increase as far as what we usually have, say last year in salaries, versus, my understanding, we're not going to have that, we're going to have the 5,000 or 3,000, is that correct?
What we have proposed for next year, there are 2 things, 2 categories. We have the bonuses of 5,000 and 3,000, and that's the first category. But we also will have for a For teachers, the state mandated increase of 4%, and that's also mandated that they move up one step on their salary scale up to step 23. And then for the non-teaching staff, which would be your administrators and classified staff in the district, they will just move up on their salary scale by one step. So there are two different components there.
So they're moving up a step and they also are getting the bonuses.
That is correct.
Okay, and now the 4% is the teachers, but that's given, we're not paying that, the state is that correct?
Well, the state has mandated it. They are funding a portion of it. They're not funding all of it. So a part of that 4% increase, we will have to pay as a district locally. And so that does contribute to that $4 million total.
So do we know how much difference that additional that's going to be, that we're going to have to fund out of that?
I am not sure of the exact amount. I know they have proposed to provide for $700,000 approximately, and that $700,000 includes a portion of the 4% and the fringe benefits associated with it. But just to give you an example, we pay a certain percentage above the minimum salary that the state says we have to pay teachers. So that's something that they're not going to fund. That will be on us. And there are some other things included in that we'll be paying as a part of that 4% increase that the state won't be subsidizing.
And bonuses, if I understand right, you said that we also would be paying, not, I guess, retirement benefits, but we'd be paying Social Security benefits on it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's mandated.
On the bonuses?
And workers' comp. Because our workers' comp insurance is based on all compensation that we pay our employees. So the more we pay, then the higher our workers' comp costs.
Okay. Do you happen to know what the difference is and what raises they got last year versus as far as the income? What we're having to pay as far as payout last year versus what we're going to be doing this year? Total amounts, one versus the other.
The total that we paid in pay raises?
Yes, sir.
For this year compared to next year, no, I don't have that figure in front of me.
Would it be hard to do that and to bring it to the next meeting?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And also the students from Chester, from Midford students. How many students do we have this year?
I don't know right off the top of my head. I know it's 100, it's over 100, and I believe less than 150, but I just don't recall how many students.
Could you find that out for next
Sure.
week? Do they happen to break that down into, like, what grades those are when we get those records, or not?
No, they don't. We just have the list of the students.
Okay, you stated that we have $4 million more this year in income. Is that correct?
Projected, yes.
Okay. Do we have particular areas that we're putting that as far as for spending?
And that's what I was saying. That $4 million is really all salaries and benefits. So every area across the district, in schools, departments, operations, everywhere, that's going to be spread across the whole district.
The reason I'm stating that, if we're getting that much of an increase, I think we ought to, if we don't have specific things, we had stated when we built the Career Center and raised the taxes, I would recommend that the district give back some of the millage that we raised. And we commented about doing that when we were able to do that.
Now, the millage attributable to the building of the Career Center is not the same millage that we're discussing this evening. This evening, we're talking about the operational millage, which is different from our debt millage. The debt millage is totally different from operational millage.
Well, I understand that,
Okay,
but still, it's money that's coming in, correct?
that's correct.
And the other is money going out, paying that debt. And when we discussed it, to build the Career Center, and we had to raise the millage to do that, we made reference to possibly down the road, if we had the extra money, that we would reduce the millage. So that's what I'm suggesting that the board think about doing, if we're able to do that. And I'd like to put that on the record, please.
Mr. Melton?
Let me say this right here, because I want to make sure I don't lose my point, my train of thought. I got older now, y'all can't, and I'm not quite sharp as I used to be. And I never was sharp. And those double pencils. I don't have a control. Yeah, thank you. But in saying that, a couple years ago, we did reduce the millage. Am I right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Because I remember, because Dr. Green brought it to us, and we reduced the millage. So we have done that. You know, I think it might have been 20. What was that, Mr.
It was
Ross?
actually, per the schedule that was approved by the board, the millage was slated to be 23.6 mils, and it was reduced down to 20.6 mils.
Well, I thought we reduced it. So just to answer that question. Okay. So I want to make sure everybody was clear on it.
What year was that?
I believe that was the third year after we began making the repayments. And I can look up the exact year, but I do know we reduced it from 23.6, which was scheduled to be 23.6 mils, and we reduced it by 3 mils to 20.6 mils.
I don't remember. I just remember that we weren't raising it throughout the year.
Yes, ma'am.
I thought.
Yeah, we did.
You would
Yeah.
look that up. Thank you.
We did reduce it. Okay, secondly, what I want to ask about is this teacher, this unfunded mandate. I got to get with it. You know, they do it all the time in Washington, D.C. They send it down, but they call it unfunded mandate. And that's what the state just did to us. Our average salary is what? Teacher salaries, starting our salary.
I'm not sure. I don't want to give you that figure. That kind
I
of
think
changes
it's
from year to year.
37.5. I done did my numbers now. It's 37.5. And the state average salary is 32.5. So we $5,000 over the state. And so when they came in and they did the 4% on us, Mr. Robinson, that's on top of that, right? Am I right? So therefore, most of it is unfunded. You said fringe benefits. I don't know you want to throw anybody on the bus, but bottom line is that they told us to give teachers, and we don't mind getting 4%, a raise additional to the step raise, as well as the bonuses. Am I right?
Yes.
So we try to figure it was the state that actually brought this on, that 4%. And so you trying to dibble up and get everybody, get all the teachers that 4%. Is that correct?
Yes, we have to.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to the classified employees. Okay. But because we don't have enough money to go around now, we can get them to step. We usually would give them a raise, like we did last year.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure I want to make sense because I studied it.
Any other question? You know I can't let you go. Was there somebody before I started harassing Mr. Robinson? Mr. Robinson, the $3 million increase in property tax that we're receiving, obviously coming from business, do we have any idea where that is coming from? Has there been an influx of business, or is there just more stuff on the books that has assessed value?
No, most of that is the one large business that we have every year. That's what most of our increases come
But
from.
isn't it true that they actually have more stuff that is being assessed? It seems like I had heard that at some point. Is that accurate?
That is true. One thing that happened, there were some businesses that were assessed initially that were associated with the work being done there. And once everything shut down, then we lost that portion of the assessment. So, we're still fortunate to have more revenue in spite of that, but we had some additional revenue that was coming in from other businesses out there that now we have lost.
Okay. All right. And just to clarify, everyone in the district is receiving some sort of pay increase, correct? Or all full-time employees are receiving a pay increase?
Correct.
If you are on the teacher scale, as you said, you get $5,000 and the 4% mandated by the state, correct? And
That's
step
correct.
increase, whatever that may be. If you are not on the teacher scale, of course, the state is mandating the 4%, correct?
Correct.
We are unable to include that at this time, but everyone else who's not on that scale is still receiving a $3,000 bonus in
Yes.
December, correct? You mentioned that the states, we're anticipating we're getting about $700,000 from the state to partially offset. Do we have any idea what percentage the state is talking about funding? I think before they talked about, last year or so, they were dickering about 2% and funding part of it or not funding part of it. Have we heard anything? Are they going to fund a specific percentage of the increase?
I think what you'll hear is that they're funding, if you're talking about the teacher salary,
Right, yes.
they're funding the entire thing. However, they're not funding the step increase portion,
Okay.
and they're also not funding the local portion that we pay, because, for example, we pay, and many districts do pay a certain percentage above the minimum amount that the state says you have to pay. And so they're not funding that portion as well. So when they say that you have to do a 4% increase, that means quite naturally that the local portion that we normally pay above that minimum is also going to have an increase, and that portion is on us as well.
Okay. And they're not contributing anything towards the increased fringe?
They are contributing towards the increased fringe, but of course not the fringe. The portion that we do have to pay, they're not contributing towards that.
Right. And I know this is getting off into the weeds a little bit, but the retirement portion that employer has to pay is now going up to 21%, correct?
Correct.
If I recall, as a person who is a member of that system, and the employee contribution has gone up to now one of the most expensive in the country, I believe, at 9% or thereabouts. Has it finally capped out? I thought it was supposed to end at some time. Is this where they said it's going to end?
I think there's one more increase, if I'm not mistaken. Don't hold me to that. I think there may be one more.
Okay, I thought we were getting close to the end of them
We
raising
are
all
getting,
that.
we're getting close to what they projected.
Okay. On the EFA, we keep hearing about per pupil funding. I think that's essentially the per pupil funding.
Correct.
We heard about, I think the governor talked about something, a whole $10 or $15. That hadn't made it into the budget thus far, correct?
Well, what the House what they proposed is actually a reduction, a slight reduction, and the last thing I read is that the Senate wants to restore some of the funds that have been reduced, so we may receive more. It's just a matter of what they finally work out between the Senate and the House in the final version of the budget.
Gotcha. But they can also take lottery funds and shift them over there and say, see, we restored it, and then we're still losing money on this end, but they're saying we got it back over here.
That's right.
And if it's not increased one dime, based on the number of students we have versus the increase in students in the state of South Carolina, it's still going to be a cut.
Yes.
Transfers in Chester. I want to make sure I'm clear on this, and I know I'm not trying to relitigate it, but did I hear you correctly? If Chester gets, let's say, hypothetically, a giant tire manufacturer appears in Chester and has a huge economic impact, and it increases their tax rolls, because they now receive more taxes, we got to pay them more money?
Yes, because we right now for the Midford students, of course, we don't get state money for them because they are on the rolls of Chester's school district. So Chester gets money from the state, the per pupil funds and other funds for them from the state. However, we do get, in theory, local tax revenues for those families in that area that Chester doesn't have access to. So the theory then is that we need to supplement Chester for the local portion of taxes that they would get if those students actually resided in Chester and were paying taxes in Chester. So what we're really paying is a portion of local taxes that would be attributable to those students if they were in Chester, which means we're basing the payment on Chester's local tax revenue. So if their local tax revenue goes up, then that means the amount we're paying per student will go up.
So if their economy does better, they get more taxes, we have to pay Chester more money, essentially.
Unless we have a dramatic decrease in the number of students, then yes.
Right, okay. And of course, that's not forecasted anytime soon, I don't know.
And the number went down for a few years, and now it's starting to drift up.
Okay. I think that's all I got for you right now. Thank you, sir. Anybody else with any other questions?
Yes, on the student, what we're talking about, Midford, about how much are we paying per student? Or what we paid last year versus
Sure, I know the total was about 600,000 for this current year. I think about 645,000 for this year is what we paid.
Saying 600,000 last year, and
In this school year, we paid about 640,000.
next year's gonna be 640,000?
Well, I'm just projecting that amount based on recent increases.
I understand. Thank you. You don't know you don't know how much that is per student?
No, I'd have to go calculate. I need to figure out the number of students, and I'm not sure the exact number.
Thank you.
All right. Any other board members? Dr.
Just to kind of summarize and clarify a few things, even though in the budget summary it does indicate with this first reading that there is no millage increase. So we want to make sure that is clear. In addition to that, once this budget is passed, and Mr. Miller alluded to it, is that with the 4% that we're mandated by the state, along with the salary step, and the $5,000 bonus, our Fairfield County School District teachers will be among the highest compensated teachers in the state. If not near the top or at the top, but once this particular budget is passed for the upcoming school year, our teachers will be the highest compensated teachers in the state. I just want to make sure that that the board is aware that in our county we are tremendously blessed. We've shared that before. Many school districts are not able to not only do the 4%, they're finding ways to do that, but we're also doing the 4% raise, the salary step, which of course is mandated, and then on top of that, the bonuses for both the classified employees and the certified employees.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody, anything further? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of first reading of the budget? We have three, two,
Three.
Three, okay. So this is just the first reading. We'll come back next month, and then final reading and third reading. So all those in favor of approval of first reading of the budget indicate by raising your right hand. That's 6 in favor. Opposed? 1 1 negative. Thank you. If I can get this thing to cooperate with me. I think that gets us down to human resources.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For your approval this evening, there are 3 human resources items. In item 1, certified resignations and terminations. The superintendent recommends the board approve certified staff resignations, terminations effective at the conclusion of academic year 2018-19. These are presented to you in exhibits 1A and 1B, which requires a special motion.
Thank you. So we'll take those individually. First, Chair will entertain a motion in regard to Exhibit 1A.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
accept the superintendent recommendation, board approved certified staff resignation termination effective at the conclusion of the academic 2018-2019 year. That exhibit A.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
That's it.
Thank you. It's been motioned by Mr. Miller. It's been seconded by Pastor Jackson to approve certified resignations, terminations in Exhibit 1A. Personnel matter, no discussion. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0. Chair will now entertain a motion in regard to Exhibit 1B.
Yes. Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I move that we accept the superintendent recommendations that the contracts of 2 induction contract employees not be renewed for the 2019-2020 school year pursuant to section 59-26-40 of the South Carolina Code of Law.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
I'm going to give the time to Pastor Jackson on that one. It's been motioned by Mr. Miller, seconded by Pastor Jackson to accept the superintendent's recommendation that contracts of 2 induction contract employees not be renewed for the 1920 school year pursuant to SE Code of Laws 59-26-40. Again, personnel, so no discussion. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand.
Chair, is there a particular reason that we are not given the information as far as the names? These 2?
Well, I mean, that's what we discussed in executive
Well, in the
session.
past, we've always had the names.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
That's why I'm asking that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You can't tell me why?
I can't, we discussed that in executive session. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. 5 in favor, negative. 2 negative, thank you.
Next is item 2, certified administrative recommendations. The superintendent recommends the board approve certified professional administrators for academic year 2019-20, presented in Exhibit 2.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
recommendation for board approval certified professional administration academic year 2019-2020. Exhibit 2, professional certified administrator.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's been motioned by Mr. Miller, second by professional certified administrator in Exhibit 2. Again, personnel, no discussion. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0.
Lastly, for your approval, item 3, certified recommendations. The superintendent recommends the board approve professional staff members indicated in Exhibits 3A, 3B, and 3C.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
want to skip on accept the superintendent recommendation for board approval professional certified staff members. Man, you got me straight. Okay, okay, exhibit 3A, current staff. Exhibit 3B, new hires, 2018-2019. Exhibit 3C, new hires, 2019-2020. If I make it a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. And it's been seconded by Mr. Davis to approve professional certified staff members in Exhibit 3A, 3B, and 7.3C. Again, personnel, no discussion. All those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. 7-0. Thank you. All right, I guess it's down to me. I don't really have any updates or announcements at this time. I do want to draw your attention to the board policy. If you'll look in your board docs, as we've talked about this for a little while, the policy we're talking about is FF. That is the naming of facilities. What I did is I looked at what we had, which really seemed to only deal with naming new facilities, which hadn't necessarily been an issue. We, of course, have had, I would say, a slight influx of requests to name portions of other facilities. I think there was probably also some suggestion, but no formal presentation, of renaming facilities that have already been named. So I kind of looked around trying to find districts neighboring us or districts that I thought might have dealt with this situation. So I'm looking at several different ones. It seems to be kind of unique to every district. Whatever they've got going on at the time, the policy reflects what they've got going on. So what I did is, if you look at my proposal, and this is first reading, I believe we have to have at least 2. So if y'all have any changes or revisions, we can do that. But what I've got here is simply, I'm breaking it into 2 parts, new schools and existing facilities. Under new schools, admittedly, if we start having to build a whole lot of new schools, we're probably going to need to flesh that policy out a little bit better. But until that time comes, I think this will suffice. Essentially what I'm saying is you cannot name a new facility after any living persons. That is something that was pretty standard in all the districts I looked at. And of course, I think we're all aware, we named some stuff in this state after folks, a lot of bridges and overpasses, and then they found themselves either under federal or state indictment. We went, ooh, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Now, I'm not saying we'd have any folks that would be in that situation, but to avoid that circumstance, it's probably better to err on the side of caution, so I included the not naming it for any living individuals. Under the existing facilities, which of course is what this is more pertinent to at this time, again, saying no facility or portion thereof can be named for a living person. Now, I know we've named some folks after, some parts after living. This would affect that. Okay, we're not going to go back and take a name off the cafeteria because this policy goes into effect. This would be prospective, not retrospective. So don't worry about that. And then it kind of lays out the procedure. Essentially, the procedure that I'm talking about here, the naming of a committee, is what we did. It may add another person or 2, but essentially it's board members, people from the community, somebody from the school. They will make the request to the superintendent for the name change of whatever the facility or portion thereof may be. Other districts were saying send it to the school principal. I figured that since it's all going to end up at the superintendent's office anyway, and we have a rather manageable district with 9 total schools at this time, that would be most appropriate to go ahead and send it to the superintendent. So you come up with your recommendation, you send it to the superintendent. It's got to include the proposed name, why you want to change the name, and then what may be controversial, but I think will help in this process, and this is what they do in every policy that I looked at where they have this, is if you make the proposal, you've got to say how you're going to pay for it. So that puts the onus on the person making the proposal to come up with the signage, the reception, whatever. And then ultimately it's the board's final decision. I did add one line in there that no facility can be renamed without a 2/3 majority of the board. Time passes, people forget who people are, and then we look at a building and say, I don't even know who that person is, we should name it for so-and-so. Well, that building got named for that person for some reason. I hate to just disregard their history because prevailing winds at that time said it was a good idea. So a supermajority of the board, and hopefully if they're with a supermajority, that means that somebody will have the historical recollection to say, well, this is why we did that. And if it needs to be renamed, that's fine. It can So there you go, there's my proposal. I submit to you for first reading. Is there a motion to? Yeah, it's an action item, it's an action.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we accept the recommendation for the renaming, what is it?
Policy.
Policy. Yeah, board policy revision, policy, renaming of facility, policy FF.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. It's been motioned by Ms. Harrison, it's been seconded by Pastor Jackson to approve. I believe this is going to be first reading of policy FF. Any further discussion, questions, issues, concerns on that?
I got one question.
Yes, sir.
How many readings?
I think it's 2. So if y'all look at it and kick the tires on it and have some major issues with it, we can of course look at it again next month. And if you like it, we can vote it into policy. Anything further on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving first reading policy FF, indicate by raising your right hand. Like 7-0, was that a? That's not a vote, okay, I'm sorry, okay. In negative, abstentions? Thank you, sir, 6 in favor, 1 abstention. I didn't know if you would give me the high sign or. That's really all I've got. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I know we can't do anything about it now, but in the future, because I'm getting a lot of calls about these little promotions, I realize that the middle school and Giger are having their promotions the same day in the morning. If they could like talk to each other, and it happened to me last year with the elementary and Giger, because apparently the little kiddies want me there, so they started to call me to invite me, and when I put it in my calendar, I said we got 2 on the same morning. So if the schools can kind of get together with their dates, you know, whatever, because I'm sure some people may have somebody being promoted to 9th grade and the elementary school, it's going to be a conflict. Thank you.
Anything further? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I make the motion, we adjourn.
Is there a second? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.